The reason that you would choose to play Ensoul is you think you have a reasonably okay Phoenix matchup, and the reason for that is specifically Ensoul Artifact plus Darksteel Citadel. Especially in a game one setting, it's very difficult for Phoenix to present enough blockers to eventually that thing is going to hit you a couple times, and then combined with Shrapnel Blast and things like that can really help close out the game fast. Eric is dealing damage in chunks of 5, and you only start at 20 life, Drake, and only a couple of those. It only takes a couple of those to get through across the finish line.
4 hits and you're dead with the Ensoul. Here is Voldaren Epicure, maybe kind of one of the maligned, you could argue, inclusions in this deck, but does produce an artifact for 1 mana. Gets a little bit of reach damage in the form of its ETB trigger, and really a card that has shown its mettle in all kinds of various decks that just care about having game objects in play. Among those, of course, is it Ensoul, which cares about having some of those artifacts. As here we go, Connor turn 2, end of turn 1 does consider turn 2. Ledger Shredder looking to be a very good blocker and maybe one of the few cards that can really get enough toughness to start to check the things like the Ensoul artifact on Darksteel Citadel, like you mentioned. As there's a look at the Epicure, and there's a look at Ledger Shredder, powerful rare from Streets of New Capenna.
And this is a really interesting spot for Eric here. I see the land and the Ensoul artifact, but the question is, that Connor has 4 copies of Lightning Axe in his deck. Are you willing to Ensoul the blood token and just say, okay, well, I'm going to get in 5 damage guaranteed. Connor's likely not going to chump block with the Shredder. And are you going to be okay with a follow-up, a follow-up Lightning Axe? And it looks like Eric has decided not to do that. We're going to go for a Smuggler's Copter instead. Maybe just, doesn't want to run that Ensoul into a Lightning Axe. And it kind of makes sense. You want to see, I don't think there's a Citadel, but maybe if you draw Citadel off the top, you can, run it a little bit safer and not have to worry about a Lightning Axe.
Yeah, and you even have Smuggler's Copter to go looking, right? Even if Ledger Shredder gets a counter, it can block, but not profitably on the Smuggler's Copter, and you can really start to dig for that Citadel and Soul combo that you mentioned. There's also, a few other solid includes in this deck as well that can really start to get involved in the combat conversation as far as making something big. Cards like Inti and cards like Cryptic Coat that can either be unblockable or pump up some of your other cards. As here is a copy of Inti, Sensual of the Sun, kind of one of the more recent includes, a rare from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Lots of text on this powerful 2-mana legendary creature. When you attack, you can discard a card. If you do, you put a counter on target attacking creature and it gains trample. So that's a lot of text already. But when you discard one or more cards, you get to exile the top card of your library and play it until your next turn. So you can even though you're getting card disadvantage to make this ability happen, you potentially could get your card back, assuming you can play whatever comes off the top.
And that consider Bind a Steam Vents, and fortunately enough for Connor, found an Arclight Phoenix. So this Impulse, we're going to trigger the Shredder. That's going to allow Connor to discard the Phoenix, and then we're also going to be able to Impulse that Smuggler's Copter. I believe that was the target over Inti. I think I saw him point to the Copter. So Phoenix in the graveyard.
The Copter with Inti, yeah.
Yeah, and then Copter is going to get fought over. And, honestly, Eric, even if you could fight over it with some kind of counter spell, we do have a Spell Pierce, and that is going to fight over, but that's also going to trigger the Shredder again.
Second spell, oh no.
And now if Connor discards a spell, you don't even have that good of an attack with the Smuggler's Copter. I guess you can discard to the Inti to make it a 4/4 and have it bounce, but you can't play the spell that you cast off of the Inti, or that you hit off the Inti, because you've already made your land drop. So Eric is, wants to fight over it and keep the Smuggler's Copter in play, but now is in a position, it doesn't even attack with it.
Yeah, that's a really tough spot. Now, it's not as bad as it looks, assuming you get to untap with your board state unmeddled with, I'd argue, because there is still one blocker, and Inti can still threaten to pump the Smuggler's Copter next turn, and then maybe you can play the card that comes off the top, and you'd really start to get something going, even if your cards in hand aren't that good. But, just not attacking, giving Phoenix more time. We're leading on sleight of hand here. That's potentially more Ledger Shredder triggers, maybe even getting the Phoenix back if we have a third spell. I know there's a Lightning Axe among the mix. So, just more turns for the Phoenix deck just means more problems typically for Eric Hennig to work through as he tries to find something to pair with his Ensoul artifact that's going to make a meaningful difference in the board state and not just get picked off with the Lightning Axe.
Yeah, Connor is really looking for a cruise here. Looks like we kept a Spell Pierce. Actually, kind of a heads-up play, because now you can go Cantrip. Yeah, well, I was going to say looking for a cruise. Already had the cruise.
Had it.
So the cruise is going to get back to Phoenix. You can attack for 6 and hold up Spell Pierce to prevent something like an Ensoul artifact off the top. So this is a really, really good spot to be in here if you are Connor. The question is, do you hold back? And he's actually said, you know what? I don't want to attack with anything. I'm going to hold back with both.
The classic who's the beatdown strategy being analyzed here by Connor, realizing that, I think that attacking is getting aggressive and opening myself up to various types of double in soul or something like that could be really problematic for me. No sense getting aggressive when you don't need to be. Each turn with these treasure cruises and things the like, all the board state is getting better for me right now. So as a result, just kind of preserve my life total, and we're going to overwhelm Eric as the game goes on because my cards are better. A solid analysis from Connor. I have to say I agree with his posturing, as there is quite a bit of problems. Here is Gleaming Gear Drake, an uncommon from the Murders at Karlov Manor. Artifact creature, cost is it to cast. Flying 1/1 when it enters, you get to investigate. So kind of gets to do the same thing that the Vault and Epicure is doing, making an artifact as it enters. Then whenever you sack an artifact, gets bigger. So that's meaningful with this blood token, which is actually pretty cool to activate here. So we're discarding a card, which is going to trigger Inti, and then you're going to get to look at the top card that way. You're going to get a counter on your Gleaming Gear Drake for sacrificing an artifact, and of course you get a new card for your trouble from the blood token. So we're just moving cards in between zones here for Eric Hennig, and I mean this is what he needs to be doing, right? This is his engine.
Yes. Yeah. Cards are flowing all over the place. Now, I guess ideally, if you're Eric here, you want something like a Torch the Tower, which there are 4 copies of in the deck list. I do not believe he picked one up. I think the hand right now is Epicure, second Inti, and its Soul Artifact. But yeah, for Eric, you're in a position where you want to, like, say, Torch the Phoenix to have that one exiled. Maybe something like Shrapnel Blast on the Ledger Shredder before the Shredder gets that third counter. But it looks like maybe that's not going to be the case because Connor maybe wants to discard a spell here. And, Connor, astute player, will have Shrapnel Blast on the mind. So we'll maybe think about discarding one of those extra spells. Maybe figures, okay, well, Eric's tapped out this turn. I can just wait till next turn to discard a spell. Doesn't have to do it right now exactly. Right. But yeah, Connor has everything, the world at his oyster.
I would say that this is among the better draws that the Phoenix deck could even present against the In-Soul deck as well. Getting that really large blocker in the form of Ledger Shredder is one of the best ways to check the card In-Soul Artifact, the namesake of the In-Soul deck. And of course, already has 2 Lightning Axes we see dialed up along with the Spell Pierce. This is a lot of very powerful interaction against the deck that normally wants to operate light on mana and tries to assemble very large creatures that Phoenix typically can't deal with. Lightning Axe, in fact, I think we're using a stray one here, discarding the Spell Pierce to pick off Inti. So this is actually a good exchange for Eric because we know he has a backup Inti in hand. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to get some use out of that. And there's a Lightning Axe down.
Yeah, if you're Eric, you're pretty happy to see that Lightning Axe because you've been holding that In-Soul Artifact basically the entire game, knowing that Lightning Axe is a possibility. Eric is clearly, it seems like he's saving it to try and find a copy of Darksteel Citadel before he goes for it. And now that one of those axes is down, maybe Eric is going to say, okay, well, now I'm in a position where one axe down, maybe I have to hope that Connor doesn't have a second axe, and just kind of go for the In-Soul. And Connor decides to go for second Shredder into Cruise, which is going to put him shields down for a turn.
Yeah, shields down, but some large blockers discarding Cruise number 3. So we're Cruise flooded here is Connor Mullally, as he does find a land that he's going to discard. So the other Shredder going to stay relatively small. 3 cards coming from, of course, the Treasure Cruise. Those first two drawn cards were from the Ledger Shredder triggers, which are going to stay on defense. And as you mentioned, shields down might be In-Soul time. I mean, Eric's been very, very patient with this In-Soul, and maybe some heads-up play with Connor, but firing off one of those Lightning Axes is, hey, now Eric thinks maybe less likely to have an axe. Maybe I'll expose the In-Soul now on something that isn't a Citadel, and Connor can just pick that off with the second copy of Lightning Axe. We'll see if that does manifest, as here's the second copy of Inti Seneschal of the Sun.
Yeah, I mean, ideally for Eric, you want to In-Soul and Inti in the same turn, because if you just In-Soul and don't cast the Inti, Connor can just say, okay, chump block with Phoenix, get it back next turn. But the problem, as we hit the Shrapnel Blast, I was going to say the problem with going for Inti plus In-Soul is that you trigger the Shredder. The Shredder that has 2 counters on it can get a third counter and give it 6 toughness, which I guess would still, you can make the In-Soul Artifact creature that's attacking a 6/6, which would get it past that 6 toughness Shredder. But then Connor could just maybe double block with Shredder and Phoenix and trade one of them for the In-Soul token.
Right, and that's still tough. But I mean, the current problem is with Shrapnel Blast revealed. We would love to cast that one, you sacrificing the clue or something like that. But we actually just don't even have another land. So between the blood and the card exiled from Inti, did not find a land, so we can't play any of our powerful 2-mana spells that Eric has access to. A really unfortunate sequence for him there. Had a lot of looks, didn't find it, and now these Shredders are going to continue to get big as we start with Sleight of Hand. And, you can try to go wide around some of the stuff. Like you mentioned, all roads kind of lead to some bad attacks for Eric. So everything is still staying on defense. Connor's life total remains high at 16. And with the Shrapnel Blast down, there's not even like a lot of, I guess, aspirations for burning him out that way.
Yeah, and Connor is just kind of churning through the deck here, triggering Shredder multiple times. I mean, really just wants to try and find the Temporal Trespass because you can get to a spot where you can play a lot of defense, and that's exactly what the Phoenix deck likes to do. Is you play a little bit of defense early in this matchup, and then you kind of have that really big pivot turn where you just say, okay, iteration, time walk, you're dead. And I think that's what Connor is really looking for, where he doesn't really have to make any sort of attacks early because he knows that the late game is going to favor him with the iteration plus temporal trespass combo. As we see, free the Fae into free the Fae. I mean, it's free real estate, right?
It's free Fae estate. I don't know. That doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Whatever. We're digging through. We're digging through the deck, and honestly, with multiple Treasure Cruise cast, multiple Free the Fae cast, at some point does like deck size start to become a thing that we're paying attention to? Probably not, but I mean he's churned through a ton of his deck.
Yeah, maybe if like the temporal trespass was the actual bottom card, but casting a couple of ops means I think that Connor would know that if it was the actual bottom card, like whatever the last opt bottomed. So I
Sure.
don't know if that's going to matter too much. As we see Eric going to go ahead and sack a clue, and I mean that Gear Drake is growing, but again, still doesn't really have a ton of profitable attacks into that large shredder and the Phoenix. So I guess if you're Eric at this point, it's like where do we go? What exactly needs to happen for Eric to have like start to make inroads on this battlefield? And I think it might start with Shrapnel Blast on the 3/5 shredder.
Yeah, so that's tough right now because we haven't cast a spell yet, so that's meaningful. And if we sack an artifact for Shrapnel Blast, we do actually grow the Gear Drakes, as here's the second one added to the battlefield, which will bring with it another clue. And so we can start to involve a combat, like you mentioned, where double blocks start to look very appealing for Connor. And then a Shrapnel Blast can actually really start to muddy that up quite a bit as well. I believe Shrapnel Blast an instant. So we can really get that one involved in combat, grow the Gear Drakes, and actually start to pick off some of the large toughness creatures that Connor Mullally is currently presenting. But we really want to grow both Gear Drakes, really get the equity out of both of those. And we want to be able to sack something that isn't meaningful. So that's where this clue token is maybe starting to come into play as well for the Shrapnel Blast. But that does give, again, Connor another turn to start to grow his Ledger Shredders, casting all these spells. We see the fourth Treasure Cruise in hand and continue to look for that Temporal Trespass that will likely seal the deal on this game.
Yeah, he actually just found the trespass off of the end step Free the Fae. So that one is in the hand and known by both players. So, with casting the cruise first, we'll have to see whether or not we have enough cards in the graveyard to cast the trespass. But we might be approaching pretty close to lethal here, just with, axe a flyer, bring back a Phoenix, attack with everything post combat, cast the iteration or cast the trespass without even needing the iteration.
Yeah, don't even need the galvanic iteration to make that happen. And yeah, that's looking very close to lethal with a second Phoenix in the yard. Both of these Ledger Shredders growing in size. And of course, if you want to perform some kind of a ritual, you want to make additional Temporal Trespass mana, Lightning Axe is very good at that, getting you 2 cards for 1 mana. So in a way, making mana when it comes to casting your Delve spells.
Yeah, and I think Connor might even have a profs in hand too. So you could say land or untapped land, which gives you 5 mana. Trespass is third spell, profs. Trigger from profs, counters on Phoenix, get back the other Phoenix, attack with everything. Eric with, I guess, 3 flying blockers. Maybe that wouldn't quite be, but it looks like we are going to go for profs.
Okay, just getting that one started. Profs, Eidetric? Can you please help me with this? I don't know how to say this.
I think it's eidetic.
Eidetic memory. Okay, it's your card. I don't know. This is just, you're the face of that card, in my opinion. Every time I see that, I think of you. So whatever that means, whatever that puts you in life, that's where things are at.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. I believe that's to you in the audience, wherever that goes. Temporal Trespass, the follow up.
Yeah, Connor does go for the profs and the trespass. So this is nice because you get more battlefield presence. But the issue, I guess the problem with this line is you have a turn where Eric has more blockers. So I guess maybe the worry is if Eric can shump block enough this turn, and then maybe it's not lethal next turn where you get back Phoenix, assuming you put a bunch of counters on that Phoenix. Yep. And then you get that back. So you're getting extra turn for Connor. As of right now, Eric has the potential for 3 flying blockers. presumably the small Gear Drake chumps the big Phoenix, and then you can bounce the 4/4 Gear Drake off of either Eat the Phoenix or one of the, bounce it off of one of the Shredders. That has you taking 6 going to 10. You have 2 flying blockers back for next turn, but I believe Connor may have 2 removal spells rolled up for the 2 blockers next turn. So I think this is going to be good enough.
Yeah, I believe I agree with you as well. I think we see double axe and fiery impulse for the next turn. So it looks like really no matter what the sequence of blocks are this turn, which I mean, obviously you're incentivized with all those removal spells to make some blocks this turn and preserve life total as much as you can. Maybe getting some double block action going too is
Yeah,
Smuggler's Copter and Gear Drake.
with the profs, I'm not sure the double block changes things because you still take 6 off of this block. You get one of the Shredders off the battlefield, and you lose 2 flyers. So that means you lose 2 blockers for next turn. Connor loses 1 attacker. You're at 10, and then the removal spell still clears the last blocker, which is, Connor has more than enough for lethal next turn. I guess Eric is maybe in a spot where you just have to say, I hope you don't have another removal spell, and then you get the chump block next turn, maybe take 6 and try to just go from there.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So we exiled. So we looted with Smuggler's Copter, discarded a land, which triggered Empty and revealed another Shrapnel Blast. So there's 1 in hand that we know about, 2 in exile that we know about. So we can't really even assemble. If Eric in some mystical universe was able to get another turn, we could even assemble like a medium attack with multiple Shrapnel Blasts in the game as Connor immediately reaching for his lightning axes on the blockers in order to try to punch through. And yeah, that's Eric sees what's going on here. Yeah, you get the blockers out the way. I die immediately, even with or without triggers and all that kind of stuff. And that a bogged down game 1, surprisingly close given how well things went for Connor through the early turns. It looks like Eric, this is part of the power of the Ensoul deck, is it almost as never out of it. As the game goes on, cards like Shrapnel Blast and Ensoul Artifact are so powerful that you're never really out of it. And I really felt that through that entire match. It's like, okay, well, there's still sequences of draws that get Eric back in this, even though everything seems to be coming up Connor and the Phoenix deck. So exciting game 1, and we still have more Magic to play. So I guess with that, let's take a look at Eric Henning's take on Izzet Ensoul, and specifically the sideboard here. We got 3 copies of Fiery Impulse, 3 Rending Volley, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Mage Bane Lizard, 2 copies of the Corroded War, 2 Rampaging Ferocodon, and of course the companion, Gigantha the Wellspring. So if you're the Izzet Ensoul deck looking to take down some birds, what are we reaching for?
I mean, Gigantha's got to be good, right? 5/5 good against all the fiery impulses.
Yeah.
The Mage Bane Lizards, I think that's kind of what they're here for. Notably, the most important part about Lizard is the fact that it has 4 toughness, which means it dodges Fiery Impulse, and it really punishes the Phoenix player for casting multiple spells and trying to get those Phoenixes back. So I think the Mage Banes are slam dunks. Rending Volley, very good at answering the Shredders in game 1, and if Connor decides to reach for the Drakes in game 2. So I like those. Mystical Dispute can help fight over crews, although it's not the best at fighting over crews because typically the Phoenix player will cast some stuff early and then cast it on turn 4 with 3 mana up. So I don't know if you want to go towards disputes, but I do like the volleys and I do like the lizards.
Yeah, the Lizards. Love them. Yeah, this is a Mage Bane Lizard, a card getting a little more stock in Modern, thanks to the Ruby Storm deck. I guess it has some leverage here in Pioneer as well against the Phoenix deck. And like you mentioned, Rending Volley being uncounterable and dealing 4 damage for 1 mana, a big deal for the Ensoul deck. Well, let's take a look over at Connor Mullally and his take on Izzet Phoenix, how he might want to adjust against Izzet Ensoul. I can't imagine we're going to see too many shatters as we take a look at 3 Crackling Drakes, 2 Disdainful Strokes, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Young Pyromancer, 1 Ashiok Dream Render, 1 Fiery Impulse, 1 Aether Gust, 1 Spell Pierce, 1 Negate, and 1 Brazen Borrower. What do you like against the Artifact aggro strategy?
Well, I would like it more if we had some Abrades or Prismari commands, but without any copies of those. So I've played this matchup a couple of times, and Pyromancer is a weird card because Pyromancer is really good at blocking Citadel and Soul if they don't have Inti, and if you can keep Inti off the battlefield. So that's actually been, at least for me, a pretty big part of the postboard matchup. So I like the Pyromancers. Borrower can be decent at answering in Soul on a token if you don't have an axe, so that could be something you want to go towards. The Drakes, I don't think I want them. I think they're a little too slow. The Impulse is pretty good. The Spell Pierce can help fight over Ensoul Artifact, and then similarly the Mystical Disputes as well.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of good 1 mana interaction upgrades, and like you mentioned, the Young Pyromancer just adding to the roadblock. We mentioned kind of Connor very much on the defense through the early turns that we saw in game 1. If he's looking to continue that, Young Pyromancer notably very, very good at blocking, creating all those chump blockers. as it is wont to do in various matches where you have time to cast spells. So with that, players have done their sideboarding very, very quickly. Both players ready for the matchup and are kicking things off immediately. Spybuff Canal into the Spyglass Siren, which of course brings with it a map token, and notably also an early flying attacker. Flying men's come a long way.
I know. Can you imagine telling people in like 1996 that we're playing Flying Men that this is the card? You know what I mean? That this is we
Yeah, it
would
just
have
brings
this
with it
card
just
and
this absurd
20
game
years later.
object too.
Yeah,
Yeah, map
exactly.
tokens are great.
Crazy. Yeah, let's see exactly what kind of hand Eric has. If we're attacking first, presumably has something like a copter. I think I see a Legion Extruder in Eric's hand. Kind of didn't mention that one in deck building. That's another relatively new card. It's sort of like the reverse Bone Crusher Giant, where it's ETB, you get the damage, and then you can sack an artifact to get a 3/3. So you can like ETB, you can kill something, and then Legion Extruder can sacrifice those extra game objects to make additional 3/3s. And what's also nice about it is it is sort of like anti-removal spell. Like if they go to kill your copter, you can just sack the copter in response and turn that into a 3/3 token.
Yeah, we've seen that with sacrifice decks where, if you have some kind of sacrifice blood artist set up and people are going to remove things, okay, well, I'll just sack it response, get whatever value I'm getting out of the sacrifice ability. I'm still getting value even though you're removing my thing. It can present some of that. So very likely a card that could be a huge player here. Smuggler's Copter was added to the board for Eric Hennig, and Connor Mullally just hauled his Storm Giants on 2, casting a sleight of hand, really moving through some of his initial cantrips. Now, I'm somebody that when I play the Phoenix deck, I typically like to hold them for the most part as long as possible, unless I have a cruise already dialed up. Connor firing off a couple right away, leaving up red mana, potentially representing some removal spells. So looking either likely for lands or removal spells, but no threats just yet. We saw the turn 2 Ledger Shredder matter quite a bit in game 1, not present here in game 2.
Yeah, I see looks like a Spell Pierce, Lightning Axe, Phoenix in Connor's hands. So maybe wants to set up for interesting. We are not going for Lightning Axe discard Phoenix on the Smuggler's Copter. I wonder if we're doing that because we want to play around in the Stubborn Denial, or maybe per Spell Pierce or some sort of counter spell where Connor's like, okay, well, I don't really want to kind of play into Eric's 1 mana counter magic, and that's why we're not going for the Lightning Axe, or potentially just wants to cast another cantrip to sculpt the hand.
So Kenzen added to the board for Eric Hennig after an attack for 4. Siren, the Spyglass Siren, and Smuggler's Copter both got in there. We discarded the Legion Extruder card we just talked about, and Mage Bane Lizard the follow-up.
Yep. And now that I think about it, this is probably what Connor was holding up the axe for, where you want to save the axe to try to kill the lizard, knowing that that's likely a card that's in Eric's deck list. And yeah, the axe is going to go right after the Magebane Lizard. Connor's going to take a point of damage. It's going to put him to 11. And then, with the Phoenix in the graveyard, maybe Connor can chain a couple of cantrips next turn, get that Phoenix back. Phoenix could be a blocker for the Smuggler's Copter. So, not the worst setup here for Connor. Maybe, so I see a cantrip, a Fiery Impulse, and a Cruise. Now, the question is, we cast 2 spells? I don't think we'd have enough to get the Cruise.
Yeah, Cruise's spell 3, I think, is a little difficult. But, I mean, even still, assuming that things, even if he can cruise, right? We're talking about, I don't think he can. So he's actually just not going to cast any more spells trying to get the Phoenix back. We're talking about only 1 blocker. This early damage for the Ensoul deck, I really want to highlight how much not having Ledger Shredder has changed the shape of this game.
Oh, yeah.
Getting all this early damage matters so much for Eric Hennig because Shrapnel Blast is so good as a piece of reach. I mean, it just doesn't, he's almost in double Shrapnel Blast territory, and that's one of the nightmare things that can happen. And now that the Lightning Axe is out of the way, we're going for the Ensoul artifact it looked like on a blood token. Did not work, but don't worry, because here comes Spyglass Siren and Smuggler's Copter. Fiery Impulse going after the Copter. And we see 1 Shrapnel Blast available in hand already for Eric Hennig, and Spell Pierce already used for Connor as he drops down to 10. I mean, we're really, like I said, we're entering double Shrapnel Blast territory. And just being in that life total territory is such a big deal for the Ensoul deck to really be able to kind of kill you out of nowhere.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, just the combination of both Ensoul Artifact and Shrapnel Blast, just giving this deck the ability to have so much reach out of nowhere. And yeah, you really do see the difference of the it's like a night and day difference of whether, when Connor has Phoenix or Shredder rather versus when Connor does not have Shredder. We see a shock here. Well, speaking of the devil, I spoke too soon, I guess. And,
Shredder, late to the party, but here for the party nonetheless, as Treasure Cruise is going to be second spell.
And now we can cruise, leaving the Phoenix in the graveyard. That's going to trigger the Shredder, get us to a 2/4. We are going to. I love this play by
with
Eric. Spawn sack. Yep.
And we get to bargain away the blood token from the Epicure to make that happen. That gets the blocker out of the way with Connor at 8. Remember, he had to just shock just there as well. Life total is dwindling. No blockers. Lots of cards coming. Remove spells in hand, but there's a real chance he just dies next turn.
Yeah, Connor's effectively at 1 life now, right? The two damage from the 2 creatures plus the shrapnel blast,
Right.
and presumably Eric's probably just going to main phase that shrapnel blast. Says, even if Eric draws a land, he says, "Well, I just want to make sure I resolve this card. I know that you probably assume that I have it anyways, and I don't want to, worry about it getting counterspelled." So, Eric, like I said, even if Eric bricks, you just go untap, attack with both. You could even map just for lethal, right? If map hits a
Yeah,
spell, then
Epicure is
we're done
potentially
here.
lethal too. We have multiple, like I said, attempts at lethal here if you're Eric Hennig.
Oh, well, I guess if you map, you don't have another
Oh, you don't have
artifact.
an artifact
Map's the
anymore.
only
You're right.
artifact, yeah.
Yeah. So we did get a great look at the draw. Here comes beatdowns for 2. Not interested in sacrificing the map. Main phase. Looks like Inti was the draw.
It's
Okay.
interesting. I almost feel like you just fire off the blast now. Like you put Connor
I
to
mean, I would
1,
want to. There's no
you
life
make
gain in
him,
Phoenix. So like what are we
yeah,
talking about? I have
make
2
it
lethal attackers rather.
make him have 2 removal spells. Eric did have a decision there of going Inti discard blast, but I mean, I guess you could go
There's no
like
way.
Inti plus map and discard blast, but that gets you to 4 damage, right? Yeah. So we're just gonna fire off the blast main phase and say, Connor, you need 2 removal spells or you are dead.
Yeah, 2 removal spells, removal spell blocker. I mean, you need a combination, and that's just against my leftovers, not even what I might draw later, anything like that. Now, Connor does have 2 removal spells and potential blockers and things like that, but if Connor has to play a bunch more turns, Epicure is still lethal, as
Yep.
well as additional, shrapnel blasts, if there's artifacts generated, anything of that nature. There's a lot of problems still for Connor and a lot of must counters that it's not clear he's going to be able to counter as the game goes on.
Mage Main Lizard also effectively lethal because you can only
Yeah.
answer it with actual removal spells.
So a ton of draws at lethal for Eric Hennig, even though it looks like Connor might be about to turn the corner. He is at 1 life. Things are starting to get very precarious. And Eric, just an Inti left in hand, but I mean, still at 20 life points. No creatures in play yet for Connor. Looks like he's going to have time, and Connor can't start attacking anytime soon.
What's funny about the Inti too is even if Connor gets back the Phoenix, right? So Connor gets back Phoenix this turn. The Epicure, I guess if you attack this turn, it's a 2/2. But if you attack with the Inti and make it a 3/3 trample,
It's
okay, well,
Epicure at the top. What damage? Ping.
never mind.
Gotcha.
I'll stop talking.
I mean, there was a lot to think about there, but that was a really cool spot. And like I said, the Ledger Shredder looked late to the party. The Torch the Tower was right on time to take care of that at instant speed, but such a different texture to the game when you're able to just get a few early hits in. Shrapnel Blast is so much reach, and even Epicure, Mage Bane Lizard, all of these cards contributed damage to the total mixture. It ended up killing Connor, even though it looked like he was about ready to stabilize, was not able to do so, which means we are going to game number 3. Players are going back to the sideboards now that they've seen some sideboard stuff in action, so we will as well. Let's take a quick look at Connor's deck and take one more look. Now that he's seen all of the Mage Bane Lizards, I'm sure that's something that he was probably at least a little bit surprised by. Is there any changes you want to make seeing some of this, I guess, non-creature hate? Like, are you more interested in the Crackling Drakes now that you see Mage Bane Lizards just to get the game over with, have better blockers?
That's interesting because if Mage Bane Lizard comes out early, it's still like indirectly good against Drake because you need to cast a lot of spells to be able to fuel the Drake. So I still think it's kind of awkward, and you're likely going to need an axe on the spot to kill that thing anyways. And I mean, maybe you could justify on the play the Drakes are a little bit faster, but I think they're still a little bit too slow. Maybe the Torch the Towers kind of change that equation where if your Shredders and Phoenixes are getting torched a lot, maybe you want to go towards the Drakes for that reason, just to make sure kind of play this longer game where it's an interact, and get the Drake. But I don't know. Let's see what Connor does.
All right, let's take a quick look one more time at Eric Hennig's list, I guess, right before, as these players are still shuffling up and resolving mulligans. So the one card I want to highlight, not much I want to talk about here, but do you have any interest in Rampaging Ferocidon or the Akroan War as extra ways to break open a stalled board state like we saw in game 1? Because obviously, based on game 2, you can win if there's no creatures in play. So the thing you are looking to handle is either breaking up creatures that are there to block or punishing Connor for putting creatures in play. Do you have any interest in either of those cards?
I think a Crone War is too slow / bad against Spell Pierce, but now that you mention it, Ferocidon could be kind of interesting if you get into the spot where Connor has to block with Phoenix, get it back next turn, block with Phoenix, get it back next turn, and that kind of in that sort of scenario, I could see Ferocidon being a little bit better, but still 3-drop that trades for Fiery Impulse, not a huge fan of it.
Okay. Reasonable enough. So now we're getting things started. Connor, turn one island into the sleight of hand, and Eric is going to have Case of the Filched Falcon. So we'll get this one up on the screen. I believe an uncommon from the Murders at Karlov Manor. When it enters the battlefield, you get to investigate. So another 1-mana card that produces an artifact. And if you're going to solve this, you have to control 3 or more artifacts. And then once solved, you have 2 and a blue. Sacrifice it to put 4 counters on a non-creature artifact. It becomes a 0/0 bird with flying in addition to other types. So this is kind of another Ensol effect that you can get once you have Metalcraft, and does give flying to the card as well.
And honestly, Drake, this is the first time we've seen the card Darksteel Citadel in play for Eric, and this is kind of exactly where you want. You want to ideally just load up on the Citadel. And what's very important about this interaction with Case is if you case the Darksteel Citadel, you can then Ensol it, and it will be a 9/9 because the Case puts counters. The Ensol makes it base power and toughness. So it'd be a 5/5 with 4+1/+1 counters on it, and that can be an extremely fast clock.
Yeah, and here Eric playing a little bit of a slower game. We see Shrapnel Blast among the next. I believe I also see Mystical Dispute. So we're holding some mana up here as we go back and forth with the turns. Both players having multiple ways and axes to interact. So quite an interactive game we're set up for. Eric, plenty of cards left in hand. Chooses not to crack the clue on Instep. Notable because he is trying to assemble that 3 artifact threshold in order to get that case solved, as here comes Free the Fae.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange to see, Eric just do nothing in these early turns besides cast that Case. Don't know if mulligans happened or maybe just Eric has a bunch like a fistful of burn spells. I saw a shrapnel blast, and not exactly sure. It's possible that he has it in soul and is maybe just not willing to run it into spell pierce, so wants to try and resolve that in soul on a later turn. But yeah, not exactly clear what Eric is working with. I think it might be dispute. Torch the tower. So a pretty reactive hand here for Eric.
Yeah, a lot of reaction. We got Torch, we got Shrapnel Blast, we got Dispute. I think there's a Cryptic Coat and a couple lands to round out the hand. And Cryptic Coat, a card that, you as you mentioned, you can run directly into Spell Pierce or Mystical Dispute, and that's pretty punishing for you because it's very powerful if it resolves. Is here comes Proft's Eidectic Memory.
And the question for Eric is, do you want to fight over this with Dispute? Because Connor has 7 cards in the graveyard, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to fight over a treasure cruise unless, Connor decides to just kind of fire it off right now, which it looks like that is not the case. And Eric picks up a card for his turn. And the Proph's Eidetic Memory has just been, a card that we saw in prior rounds. Just looked very, very good. Was very good for Connor last game. Didn't, quite get, or very good in game 1 rather. But yeah, I've been a very, very big fan of this card. Just allows you to turn all of your cantrips into extra damage and helps you a lot in those sideboard games where your opponent has the graveyard hate, and you can kind of sidestep it with profs and just make, even like with Picklock Prankster, just making a giant vigilance threat just comes up so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Connor actually has access to here if he wants it. Now, Eric, like I said, been very patient with this Mystical Dispute. Now has assembled with this Smuggler's Copter added to the board a solved Case of the Filched Falcon. So that's now solved and can be activated for 3 mana at any time and make the Darksteel Citadel into something very powerful. So here comes the Treasure Cruise, very powerful. Inside this memory here comes a bunch of cards. And, with no maximum hand size, don't even need to worry about anything like that. So a ton going on here for Connor. And, he's able to be very patient as well. Under no pressure, has correctly identified he's under real no pressure to get the game over with. He wants to just continue to draw his cards and hope that his cards will amount to more than what Eric is presenting. But these Spell Pierces, these disputes, as players make land drops, are beginning to expire.
Yeah, and we see a Picklock Prankster. I actually wonder if Eric is supposed to fight over this. I guess no,
yeah, at least with Torch the Tower or something. Tower. Yeah, I think he's like, wait a minute, you're triggering with that. I want to.
I can't give you a 4/7 or whatever 4/6.
So here comes Torch, and now Spell Pierce will work. Yeah. So we're going 3 damage after this with the trigger on the stack. So Spell Pierce to fight. And that's going to go after the Torch the Tower. So we're building a little bit of a stack here.
Yeah, now Eric can dispute back.
Eric will dispute back.
Now Connor does have another Spell Pierce is the question. The answer is no.
Yeah, Spell Pierce dispute. The answer is no. So the Prankster's gone away. Connor mostly tapped out at this point, and now we start to look at, okay, is it time to get... Yeah, we're separating our mana very quickly. I think it's time to start getting this Darksteel Citadel involved in combat.
Now, here's the question. Do you insole first or do you case first? Now, I think you want to case first because if you insole first, you can only case a non creature artifact. So if you case first, then you can insole to make it a 9/9.
Sure.
I like the sequencing here from Eric. We're going to deal 4 damage down to put Carter down to 14. And then with the Shrapnel Blast or it doesn't have the insole, but right, we have the Cryptic Code
Cryptic Code.
Inti is the leftovers.
Some good leftovers, I'd say. I mean, a lot
Right.
of mana to work with, even after turning one of your lands into a creature. You have Smuggler's Copter to kind of give the Inti haste in its own way. And Connor's just now deploying this Ledger Shredder. And really, if you're desperate, you can still even Shrapnel Blast one of these Shredders as the second one is added to the mix.
Yep. So second shredder, Phoenix is going to go to the graveyard, and this Profs is going to make even though we can't trigger the other shredder this turn, the second shredder is going to get some counters from the Profs. Or it looks like we're going to target the first one. I guess that makes sense to play around Torch the Tower because if you target the new one, maybe Eric can go torch the shredder and get that off the battlefield. So we'll see what Eric wants to do here. And now
Another
Connor has a
Citadel.
5 toughness shredder, but with that Inti, you could say, play Inti, attack with the Citadel, counter on it, and that gets you over the hump and gets you past that big shredder.
I mean, we have a lot of great options, right? We can Inti, like you mentioned, and get that going. We also still have the Cryptic Code as the ace in the hole. So that's something that we can just play, equip right away. I believe.
Yeah, so presumably Connor wants to impulse the Inti because he recognizes you have a good block in the 4/4 Citadel right now. Don't want to make that Citadel into a 5/5 because then your blocks become a lot worse. I guess the other option is maybe if Connor has 2 cantrips, you could let the Inti attack, double cantrip, discard a spell, counter on the Shredder, and then kind of brick wall it that way. But it looks like we are going to fight over the Inti, and we'll see how Eric wants to proceed from here. I mean, even if you cure the copter, you don't have a ton of good
Yeah, you
attacks. I
don't have any
guess you
really good attacks. I mean, you probably still do it, right? I mean, if he's willing to take 4, that's double Shrapnel Blast territory, and we already have 1 dialed up. Is that worth making that attack for?
Oh, you go attack with both, and then the issue with attack with both is maybe Connor sniffs out the double Shrapnel Blast line, and maybe Connor just chump blocks the 4/4 with the 1/3 and eats the Smuggler's Copter.
Sure. I mean, it's not great. As here comes the Cryptic Coat.
And that
Yes,
is the
that
second
one.
spell,
Yeah, it triggers both
right?
Ledger Shredders.
Is the Inti and the code.
Oh my goodness, did we miss it?
Looks like we might have missed the triggers. Okay. So that's a bit of a plus here for
Oh.
Eric.
Okay, I mean that could be potentially a very big deal, as these Ledger Shredder
Yeah.
toughnesses are very, very relevant to the board state as it stands right now. And Connor going to start with Free the Fae on another copy of Pricklock Prankster out of hand. Get a look at 2 lands, Opt, and another Pricklock Prankster. Has a couple options there. And of course, now second spell is guaranteed, so the Ledger Shredder is very likely to work on this turn. And now the Prof's Memory going to start going to work as well, with any amount of cards drawn off these cantrips, as Free the Fae number 2 being cast. Looking for Treasure Cruise, I would guess. Does not find it. Finds a Fiery Impulse. Not great on this board.
Didn't do the shredders again, right? Yeah, you see the shake of the head for Connor. Yeah, so that was the second spell, and we just immediately went to resolve the Free the Fae. We did not go for the shredders.
Oh, we missed the Shredders again. Oh no,
Okay.
Connor!
It's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, look, you can see that's actually so bad. You can
know.
read his lips there. He's like, uh-oh. So he sees it. I don't think we're going to be missing any more of that action, but is it too late? Have we given Eric an opening with these Shredders being relatively small? I mean, the Prof's now a lot more mitigated.
Oh, that's true, because now we don't even get counters off the Profs. Wow, that is
it's tough. But we can still get some chump blocks and stuff involved. If we just want to do things like play some of these Picklock Pranksters, maybe you can actually kind of make up for it with some of these extra pieces you have lying around. You can get another chump block in and then try again next turn. You still have plenty of spells to work with, plenty of removal spells to work with. So Connor just needs to kind of decide, does he want to continue to cast spells? And we have, Lightning Axe, get another bird back, potentially have 2 birds as well. We have blockers forever. So the question now is, what blocking force do you want to present to Eric on his next turn?
And I think Connor might even have another Phoenix in hand. So you could even say, axe the Cryptic Code, pay the is it word 1 or word 2? I always forget. Let me pull up the Cryptic Code.
Yeah, that's a great
word
question.
2. Okay, so you actually can't do that. I mean, you could just go axe. Yeah, I guess you could just axe the Citadel to get back 2 Phoenixes, but maybe that's not the best idea. So it looks like what Connor is choosing to do is hold up 2 removal spells. So you can maybe say, cast 2 removal spells on your turn, trigger the Shredders, discard the Phoenix, go from there. But yeah, so that's going to be Cryptic Code coming in. That's going to put Connor to 11. And remember, Eric still does have that copy of Shrapnel Blast. So, we know that Connor is at a virtual 6 life. And with that Cryptic Code presenting 3 damage a turn unblockable, Connor's going to want to make sure that he answers that and doesn't try to take a little bit less damage off that.
So 2 Picklock Pranksters. So that will trigger the Ledger Shredders if we are, going to remember those. I believe we are, as here comes the Ledger Shredder triggers. Not going to forget those this time. Phoenix hits the bin. That's going to grow whichever one just triggered. So we're started with that one. Here comes the second one. So these are now getting very, very big as we are looting through the deck, thanks to the connive ability. But like you mentioned, the real threat, and this is something that has to be on your mind, and this is the real pressure to get the game over with, and some of the power of this deck is Shrapnel Blasts.
Mm-hmm.
We know about one. Connor doesn't know how many are there. So even though he has a blocking force, it looks like, okay, yeah, I've shut down the creatures for the most part. We can now pay the ward to kill the Cryptic Coat, which of course, I mean, you can just pick that up, replay it if that's all Connor's got going on. If your whole plan is just kill that comment, okay, pick it up, replay it, your turn, and you continue to buy time to find those Shrapnel Blasts. Connor really needs to, start assembling some attacks. But there's an indestructible blocker. So, yeah, that one's, it gets really hard. Yeah, he's reading it. Okay, yeah, it's still that's still a creature. It still flies. It's still unblockable. And so he's able to block Ledger Shredder. And one attacker's not going to do it. You got to start sending more than one. And that's really what's making this puzzle very difficult for Connor Mullally here.
Yeah, if you're in Connor's spot, it's like, how much time do you actually think you have? How many Shrapnel Blasts do I think my opponent has? Maybe you can safely assume there's probably at least one. Eric's gone through a decent chunk of his deck at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's at this point where that Cryptic Code's just going to keep coming in. Connor is, I think you got to kill it at some point. Yeah, you got.
Yeah, here
so
we
we're
go.
just gonna
No blocks
impulse
before
that.
damage. So we're gonna go ahead and impulse that, and land was underneath
And
the disguise there.
honestly, with Connor tapped out, I think I would just pick up the code and replay it. Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like
love
that's what
this.
Eric's going to do. Because
Pick
he
it up, replay it.
recognizes with Connor at 11, he only needs to get 2 attacks in with that code because, we know about the Shrapnel Blast. So Connor has to basically answer that Cryptic Code every single turn. Maybe can afford to take one more hit, but if Connor, again, presumes that there's 2 Shrapnel Blasts, maybe Connor thinks that he just can't take a single other hit from that code for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and it's even more interesting too because, like I said, without something like Trespass Iteration going, where you are safe. Oh no!
Oh, that's
Oh
pretty good.
no! Yeah, that one is quite strong against the Darksteel Citadel. It's in the way. You see a shake of the head from Eric. Now nowhere near as much time as he thought he had in order to work down Connor's life total with this Cryptic Code. I wonder, if he's interested in crewing the Copter. I mean, he's very likely to get picked off, but if you can get a loot off, he has a bunch of extra cards like lands and stuff he's not interested in using in his hand, and he really needs to find that second Shrapnel Blast to really start to cook here. And we also prevent some of the damage coming across so that maybe something like a Trespass follow-up doesn't just kill you.
Yeah.
There goes the Prankster.
And honestly, I'm not even sure the second Shrapnel Blast is good enough at this point because Connor has 2 Lightning Axes in hand. Connor is definitely just, at the point where we're holding up removal spells for the Cryptic Code every turn. And because I think he maybe recognizes that's the only way he can lose this game is just one attack and then double Shrapnel Blast. So presumably, as long as Connor can play around that, and you still have a blocker for the Smuggler's Copter. So worst case scenario, Eric plays an attacker, crews the Copter, attacks with both. You blast the Cryptic Code token, chump block the Copter. Inti could change things because you could put a counter on the Copter.
Yeah, I think that's what we're doing right now.
Damage, right? Because it gives it trample. So you have a 4/4 trample versus a 1/3. So if Connor axes the Cryptic Code token, then blocks the Copter, you do end up falling to 10. So maybe you end up doing it in the reverse order. But no,
and 2 discards gives you 2 more looks, right? We have 4 mana up. So if we discard a card to the Copter and discard a card to empty, that's 3 more looks actually at second Shrapnel Blast, and we have all the Citadels to use it. So this is actually a really tough spot for Connor because this represents a lot of looks, even if he, Connor doesn't know how many Shrapnel Blasts are there now, but it also represents a ton more looks if Eric doesn't have any yet, and you can just die out of nowhere. So there's a lot more going on than even just what does your attacks look like. Even if we're doing some chump attacking, we're going to Lightning Axe the Smuggler's Copter, and now we get to sacrifice it to the Shrapnel Blast in response.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was questioning what was the Lightning Axe going over, but it looks like we answered our questions with the the Smuggler's Copter, because then the Shrapnel Blast is going to go after that. Still have 2 mana to pay for a Spell Pierce if Connor was to find that. And notably, also the Inti is still in place, so we can even get another look with that Cryptic Coat. So the blast puts Connor down to 6. The coat attack off of Inti, discard, that puts Connor to 2, which means an Epicure would not be enough.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And so, yeah, it looks like we've discarded 2 things, and down to 6 goes Connor Mullally. And now Cryptic Coat is free to attack, and Inti can still grow that. So we can actually get 4 points in here, putting Connor to 2 if we want. We'll see if Eric is interested in doing that. And the answer is no. Okay. Okay, no, we are. We are. All right, I'm sorry. I thought he was shaking his head. No, and there's second Shrapnel Blast!
My goodness.
And Connor immediately had hand in hair and says, yep, I'm go to 4. And wasting no time, Shrapnel Blast to the dome. We have an opt-in hand we have to cast. If we can find a Spell Pierce, we can stop it. We get a lot of looks. We have Ledger Shredders, too. This is Connor's second spell.
Right, because we had 3 mana up. We let on Axe. This is the second spell. So we do get 2 more looks off the Shredder. So let's see. Does Connor find the Spell Pierce?
That didn't look like a Spell
Nope,
Pierce.
That was not a Spell Pierce. One more.
Look number 2. That's not it.
That's it.
2 more looks. Upped. Bottom very quickly. Second card's Impulse. That's not it. Shaking the hand. Eric Hennig wins this match. Oh my goodness. What a finish. And this is the power of the Ensoul deck, is just so many ways to find those Shrapnel Blasts, and 2 Shrapnel Blasts. I mean, Connor started that turn with 11 and really no good attacks for the most part from Eric. Ended up dying that turn just from 2 Shrapnel Blasts and an attack from Cryptic Coat. I mean, the power of Shrapnel Blast on full display. And Connor, maybe the game looks a little different if we remember some of the Legend Shredder triggers we missed, but I mean, even that's not clear. I mean, 2 Shrapnel Blasts is a tough spot to try to work through. And Connor now falling to 2-1. Again, he is number 6 on our leaderboard. He is trying to earn one of those 2 at-large spots for the season 1, as this is the end of season 1. It punched his ticket to the Energy Championship. So a tough spot, but can rally back. Playing the best deck in the format, according to us. But we'll see if that's true for the rest. But that is going to do it here for round number 3. We're going to be back with more Sweet Pioneer action and maybe more Shrapnel Blast, who knows, for round number 4 very shortly. Please, if you want to support us and support the stream, please follow. And of course, if you want to remove some ads, subscribe. We will be back. Do not go anywhere.
Tabi no hajimari wa tsune ni道への一歩である。それは闇へと続く。初めの一歩を踏み出すには勇気がいる。そして旅の終わりには旅を始めた時の自分とは別人になっているかもしれない。旅に出よう。物語の次の章がお主を待っている。将軍の道を歩め。侍の箱とともにアルティメットガードが送る冒険の第一章。刀将軍の道近日発売。